Oh, okay. Well, it's good to be back in Texas. It's been a while since I've spoken to Clear Lake. I think it was a couple of years. We were trying to decide how long it's been since I've been here. And it's interesting that I'm here at a time when we got the news from the case, the Texas case. The judge has ruled in favor of the state of Texas. And we sent out a press release about it, and it's good news because at least for now, you know, we have been able to, or the courts have been able to say that the Obama administration cannot go forth with their executive amnesty, among other things. And the point that I was making last night, and I think it bears repeating today, is that it's the American people, through their duly elected representatives in Washington, that get to decide who can come into this country, how many can come into this country, and what the rules are. We are the only stakeholders that are allowed to make those rules. And unfortunately, over the last few years since this administration has been in, they've seemed to have come up with their own rules. And part of what I want to at least go over tonight is we did a timeline of the administration's evisceration of the immigration laws and policies. And, you know, in fact, that their policy is there should be no illegal alien left behind. But I'm just going to go through the highlights of 2014. I won't take you, we have the document on our website. It's 67 pages long. I couldn't obviously make a copy for everybody, but you're welcome to go there and look at the documents from 2009 to 2014 So just the highlights. For example, January 24th of last year, DHS Secretary says illegal aliens have earned the right to become citizens. That he gave that speech at the U.S. Conference of Mayors when he was advocating for comprehensive immigration reform. January 31st, Obama threatens unilateral action on immigration again. Remember earlier in January, he said he had a pen and a phone, and he promised he was going to take care of it. February 7th, DHS Secretary preps for amnesty. February 8th, Obama puts illegal aliens ahead of law-abiding citizens. The New York Times reported that time that USCIS had been prioritizing the processing of applicants for President Obama's deferred action for childhood arrivals. That was the policy that he put in place in 2012 that allowed students or young people who were brought over here by their parents, and they had to be between the ages of 16 and 31. They qualified for the DACA program. So that happened then. And then Obama seeks to cut immigration enforcement. That was March the 4th of 2014. Trying to reorganize and cut the budget for immigration enforcement, which is really important. We need immigration enforcement. But he made a statement May 13th, the president did, of 2014. President Obama tells law enforcement officials that enforcing immigration laws, quote, isn't smart. Close quote. Immigration enforcement is, quote, not a good use of our resources. It's not smart. It doesn't make sense, close quote, he says. And he made those comments during meetings with law enforcement officers at the White House during DC's annual Police Week, where law enforcement agents from across the country were together to honor the service of fallen soldiers. So that's kind of the highlight so far. And then the other one is May 30th of this last year. Obama's dream to cost taxpayers over $2 billion. And they just said that this new amnesty that's now at least stopped, that it wasn't going to cost the taxpayers anything, that they were going to use fees to pay for it. Well, that's what we thought about the DACA program as well. The Office of Management and Budget sends House and Senate appropriations a letter estimating that U.S. taxpayers will spend approximately $2.28 billion in 2015 on unaccompanied alien minors that enter the United States. So, and that's just part of what the administration did in 2014, leading up to what happened in November, when the president, of course, announced his second amnesty, the DAPA program. And it was at that point that, of course, the state of Texas, and joined by other states, decided that they were going to file the lawsuit. I can't speak to that because I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the ins and outs of that legal process is. There are better minds than mine who can calculate that, but it certainly was an encouraging thing to see that we're moving back to a constitutional form of government. The president, for some reason, is uncomfortable about using the legislative process. You know, I mean, part of the legislative process is persuading your adversaries to your side. It's persuasion. It's working with people on both sides of the aisle to get your agenda complete. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's Brian. Try to move this out of the way.
But for some reason, the president is either uncomfortable or unwilling to do that sort of process and work with Congress on a plan. And irrespective of what the court said, we still have a bill now. The House, to their credit, did their work and passed the Repeal Amnesty Act of 2015. It was Congressman Adderholt's bill, and he filed it on January 7th, 2015. And I want to go through what that bill's about, because the bill is still in the Senate, and they're now having to decide what they're going to do. And there are, obviously, there have been Democrats, and I will name the ones that at least have publicly come out and said that they were uncomfortable with the president's executive amnesty. But let me tell you what's in that bill in case you don't know. It is not a bill that defunds Department of Homeland Security. These are added to the bill. The Department of Homeland Security is fully funded in the bill. These were added to stop the president's executive amnesty, among other things. So I'll start with the defund amnesty. It says by preventing DHS or any other federal agency from using funds to implement, administer, enforce, or carry out the administration's amnesty policy, including the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals amnesty and the broader executive amnesty that he announced November the 20th of 2014. And Congress will use its power of the purse, which it did, to stop the president from initiating policies and financial expenditures that the American public has said repeatedly it does not want. It curbs the abuse of parole in this bill that has allowed entire classes of inadmissible aliens to enter or remain in the United States. It also bars aliens with parole status from gaining lawful permanent residency or work authorization. They've already given over 5 million work authorizations to people that didn't qualify for work authorizations. The bill restores the original intent of parole authority, which is designed to be used on limited case-by-case basis. It's never been used for a whole class of individuals. It's case-by-case. It also bars illegals, aliens granted deferred action from gaining work authorization. The bill would protect American workers by preventing millions of illegal aliens from legally taking jobs sought by citizens and legal immigrants. It also stops illegal aliens who've been granted deferred action or parole by the Obama administration from accessing certain public benefits. That includes Social Security, Medicare, and Obamacare. People who are in parole in place, they would have gotten immediate into Obamacare, Social Security, all the public benefits that you and I have. The bill protects the solvency of our social programs, and it keeps the American safety net from being drained dry by those who have no right to be in the country. It reaffirms local law enforcement, because I think this is really important. The Secure Community Program was stopped by DHS, and you have law enforcement every day who are just doing their job. And so what this bill does, it's acted that reaffirms that local law enforcement acting within constitutional limits has the authority to identify, apprehend, and detain individuals suspected of violating U.S. immigration law. In some jurisdictions over the last few years, the police would arrest an individual and they would call ICE to have them run them through the database, but then ICE wouldn't come and pick them up. So the bill requires federal authorities to take custody of removable aliens at the request of state or local authorities. The bill reverses years of Justice Department intimidation of states wanting to assist in enforcement of federal immigration policy. Again, I said it reinstates the Secure Communities program, which was terminated by Secretary Jay Johnson. The program helps local communities identify illegal aliens and make sure they're removed from the country after serving their time. So it puts the program back in the place where it's supposed to be. And actually, it's a very workable, I mean, I've talked to sheriffs, and it's a very good program. It also, the bill also reins in executive authority to waive the 3- and 10-year bar on illegal aliens returning legally to the U.S. And essentially, the bill reinstates what it was supposed to be. Like if you did, and I don't remember exactly what the qualifications are, you could be deported and be barred for 3 years, or you could be deported and barred 10 years before you can come back and gain entry again, legal entry into the country. And this is really significant also. William Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act. During the surge in the Valley this summer, under the Wilberforce Act, you could, when Mexican minors would cross the border, or Canadian minors cross the border, Border Patrol and ICE take care of them, but they are repatriated, and because that's what the bill was supposed to do. It's repatriation. And they do it actually in a very humane way. And they just don't turn loose across the border. They actually take them back to their area or home country so somebody can pick them up and take them home. So, but this law was originally to prevent alien trafficking. That was the original intent in this bill, but is now actually fueling more trafficking. And it says that minors from any country other than Mexico and Canada can't be returned until they have a lengthy and formal removal process. Well, that's why those minors that are still here, and I believe that the immigration courts are now backed up till 2019 on cases. And it's become a loophole because human smugglers and traffickers from Central America know that they can get somebody into the country, they're going to stay. They're not going to leave. So this is part of what the bill does. So the Repeal Act treats all alien minors from all countries the same. And in doing so, it'll reduce illegal immigration and yet preserve its original purpose. So I do have, which I didn't bring my handouts, but I left them at the hotel. So I told Mary that I will send a link, and she can send them out to you, that has some of these documents so that you can take care of them, so you can look at them for yourself. And so this is where we are right now. And I also, I wanted to talk about and I hope I got my documents here, the cost to the state of Texas. And this is part of the reason when you had the lawsuit, is that illegal immigration costs the states. It costs some states more than others because of the population in that state. But in Texas, according to our study that we did, it cost the taxpayer $10.83 billion in 2013. This doesn't add into the recent influx from the surge in the summer.
2013? Yeah.
That was the numbers from, we published the report in 2013. Actually, I think it was the beginning of 2014. But it's $10.83 billion. You have an estimated 1.8 million illegal aliens and 629,000 of their U.S.-born children.
And that was still 2013 numbers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're coming out with a new study. It'll probably come out in April, which will update these numbers, but for now, this is the numbers. The illegal aliens and their American-born children cost Texas taxpayers $12.1 billion in state and local costs. And they only pay, people who are here unlawfully do pay taxes, either sales tax or whatever it is, but in Texas, the taxes that are collected by the state by these folks is $1.27 billion, leaving a burden of $10.83 billion for the Texas taxpayers. So you're not getting you're really not getting a break at all. So you do have that burden with the states. And I do have this that I'll send you, which actually talks about the education is $8.5 billion, $1.9 billion for healthcare. Justice and law enforcement is $1.1 billion. Public assistance is $47.8 million. So, and the cost per head of household for U.S. citizens is $1,197. So there is a cost. And I understand that people are working and paying taxes, but the fact is that it's still cost in social services, and education being the biggest problem with that. And it wasn't too long ago that it was quoted in one of our studies, which I thought was really interesting. Barack Obama wrote in 2006 in his book, Audacity of Hope. He said that, quote, huge influx of mostly low-skilled workers threatens to depress further the wages of blue-collar Americans and puts strain on an already overburdened safety net, close quote. So I'm wondering if the president is still thinking about those words that he penned in 2006 in his book, Audacity of Hope. Because the fact is that we can't afford to do this. We have, there was testimony last week, or week before last, regarding how much the tax benefits, and I'm sure, did you all read the articles about that, about the earned income tax credit that the newly amnestied people will be getting if this had gone forward? Yes. And so, and that of course is remarkable, just absolutely remarkable. So those costs are borne by the taxpayer, and that's why something has to be done. Something has to be done on a federal level because that's part of their responsibility. But also there are things you can do on a state level. And I'm not familiar with all the bills that are before your state legislature this year, but that is worth monitoring about that because states have a right to self-determination. Now the administration sued Arizona because they of course decided to pass a bill that was their right to self-determination, and the feds came in and said, no, I'm sorry, you can't do that. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court. They sued the state of Alabama. So it's incumbent that that Texas and Arizona, they asserted their rights to self-determination, and that's what America's about. It's about self-determination. It's about states' rights and saying, no, we're going to work within this law. We're going to protect our citizens and our taxes and so forth. And but that's not how it worked last few years. But I will say that even though we have the lawsuit that comes, we still have that bill sitting in the Senate. And it's become extraordinarily tense now because Homeland Security, it needs to be resolved by the 27th of February. And there's no money. So the problem is not the Republicans who are there. They do need 60 votes to pass this on. We do have, it'll be the President and the Senate Democrats who decided that not funding funding DHS, not funding DHS is actually it's more important to take care of the President's executive amnesty than it is to fund DHS. And there could be a shutdown, nobody knows what's going to happen. But this is the fight now between the President, obviously, and what's going on in the Senate. And so some of the senators that have publicly come out with concerns is, for example, Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly. He wrote that, I'm frustrated as anyone that Congress is not doing its job, but the President shouldn't make such significant policy changes on his own, close quote. Senator Angus King from Maine, quote, I also frankly am concerned about the constitutional separation of powers. You know the Constitution says that the Congress makes the law and the President executes it. It's very clear division. The framers knew what they were doing, and it doesn't say if the president gets frustrated and Congress doesn't act, he gets to do, you know, what he thinks is important for the country, close quote. Virginia Senator Mark Warner, quote, big issue like immigration, the best way to get a comprehensive solution is to take this through the legislative process, close quote. Missouri Senator Claire McCaskill, she's my senator, our immigration system is broken and I support a comprehensive plan to fix it, but executive orders aren't the way to do it, close quote. But she continued, quote, I have to be honest, I know how this is coming about makes me uncomfortable, and I think it probably makes most Missourians uncomfortable, close quote. John Tester from Montana, I would prefer that Congress act, yes, close quote. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, these are all Democrats, these senators, from North Dakota, she said it's Congress's job to pass legislation and deal with issues of this magnitude. And again, I can't disagree with any of these senators. It is. But the president has taken it upon himself not to do that. He won't do an end run around Congress and do that. And that's what the judge said in his 123-page report. I'm giving the Cliff Notes version of that, but that's basically what he said. So the president can't do that, but we do have an opportunity as Americans to affect some kind of, to get this thing moved along. And that's why we're asking, we sent a press release out, an alert out, and if you aren't on our alert system, I hope that you do get on it, that to make calls, to make as many calls as you can, to Democrats and Republicans in the Senate, and ask them to please, 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 to pass this, because we need, and I will tell you part of what's here is that, the ruling does make part of our case for this amnesty. To defund this executive amnesty program. It does, it's helpful. But the House passed a DHS funding bill that defunds the president's executive amnesty is stalled, and it is stalled. Because pro-amnesty Democrats are preventing the Senate from debating or even offering amendments. On 3 separate occasions, they had a vote. 3 separate occasions. So it runs out February 27th, so we need to get on that. So call your senators and tell them that, you oppose the president's executive amnesty, and I'm sure all of you have. You've opposed it. And you expect them to vote yes on the motion to proceed. Because I'm not exactly sure how the Senate works. The rules are entirely different than they are in the House. And you want Congress to stop the president's abuse of power now and in the future. And this bill will stop it for the future. So this is why because once this happens, if this doesn't work, then if the lawsuit is overturned in favor of the government, or if this bill doesn't get passed either way, there's no turning back. We can't go back, and I think the judge also mentioned that in his brief. So the time is of the essence for us to make phone calls, and I would go visit your legislators, because they're back in the district this week, and have a conversation about why this is important to us. And we have the talking points on why this is important, and I just encourage you to do that, because we need everybody to get this done. And is there any questions that you have that I can maybe answer? Yes.
I have a question, but I have an announcement first that
Sure.
you might want to hear, and certainly everybody else here does. Right before we sat down to listen to Joyce, I got a phone call from Joanne Fleming. Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and Attorney General Paxton held a press conference today at 6:30 p.m. They laid out what they think border security is for Texas. They said it is 0 border crossings, 0. And they will be secure when there is 0 crime associated from people who come across. 0 murders, 0 robberies, 0 drug crimes. I'm looking for the text of that press conference now. Joanne was so excited she just had to call and tell me. We've been working this issue very hard here. So that's encouraging that now the highest level, you noticed who wasn't in that crowd. There was no Speaker Strauss. But all the other high-level statewide officials were there. They had a group with them, and they laid out specifically what they want for border security for Texas. So now my question. The media,
That's good news.
the media always beats us up for beating on the poor migrant worker who just comes across to
Have a better life.
have a better life for him, his family, etc.
Taking jobs Americans don't want to do.
Exactly. Is there a serious effort to put in place a federal alien classification system that would start keeping numbers on who it is that is crossing our borders unlawfully? Like, you can always say...
You mean by country of origin?
No, ma'am. I mean like a classification of, this man is an economic migrant because he fits the classification. This person is a persecuted refugee. They fit the criteria. This one's a criminal. This one's a cartel member. This one's a transnational gang member. This is a human smuggler or a sex trafficker. This is a victim of human slavery.
Of these people you're saying who have been apprehended at the border?
I'm just saying, whoever gets caught, they get been classified.
I don't know that there is. I know that they have them by...
Border Patrol is not allowed to anymore, and ICE no longer gets in contact with Interpol or anyone to find out any information on these people.
We lose part of the argument when we can't definitively say, yes, 25% of your traffic are human slavers or cartel members, what have you, because if you can say, do you want to let them in? And they say no, they say, how can you stop them if you let everybody else in? You can't.
Well, that's part of the problem, is that we don't know who's coming over. And if we catch, just because we catch people, because even the EPIC Center, the El Paso Center, they did a study too during the surge, or it was just after that, about the problem. But they laid it out by the countries that the people came from, and that they said it was responsible because of the effects that were going on with the amnesty, that's why the people were coming here.
But there are discrete profiles that are applicable to these people coming across.
Well, I don't know if there is one.
You look to organizations like FAIR to come up with these things because it gives us weapons in the discussions with our representatives, with our lawmakers, with the media, with just the general public. And if you can start citing facts and say, of the people we've apprehended illegally crossing the border, 23% of them were from identified transnational gang members. That's a big number. That's an important thing to note. So it's not all poor Juan and Jose who are coming across toiling for a living, looking for a better life. It gives us more context to put the argument and discussion into.
That's interesting. So, well, I'm gonna remember.
Go to it.
Yes.
Well, one of the things too about even just migrant workers, there are a lot of studies, there's a lot of articles out there about what actually goes on these farms. You know, they're held in migrant camps within the farm. You know, and these are large farms. So the public really never sees them. They bus in girls for their lunchtime entertainment that are being trafficked. You know, and then they go back, and there was a story I read in North Carolina. They bus them in, they work them during the night in Raleigh, and then they bus them to these farms during the daytime. But it's so, I mean, so, okay, Juan wants to come and pick tomatoes, but look what Juan's doing. He's all part of this sex trafficking issue too. I mean, it's all connected. You can't separate it. You really can't.
Yeah, it's very...
And I spoke with a Texas Ranger who told me that they predict 70% of those children that came across the border in this surge will be trafficked. Not all in the sex trade, but they will be trafficked. And we have no idea who came and picked them up. We have no idea who they were sent to. These children were put into slavery in one form or another. And nobody even cares. Once they get across and they get dished out around the country, nobody cares about them anymore.
I know, it's a terrible situation that happened, and it's directly responsible because the administration has...
But that's what the Wilberforce bill was supposed to fix.
Right.
Instead of just
But I will tell you this, to go back to reiterate what I said earlier, is that it's the American people and their elected representatives that decide who comes in, how many, and what the rules are.
Well, apparently not.
Pardon me?
Apparently not. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, but that's not working.
Well, but that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But if you don't enforce the rules, then the first 2 points they're moot.
True.
So if the rules aren't being enforced, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
You know, our founding fathers in their wisdom set up a system that we all believe in. It's supposed to be 3 equal branches. But we know that since FDR, this has slid to where the executive branch has become all powerful and almost a monarch.
Well,
And the problem that we're having is that the executive branch has all the control for all the mechanisms to enforce. And you have no means to do anything, just like he was talking about. We have no means to enforce anything because it's all controlled by the executive branch. And we can go down and we can try to document people and try to figure out what category they're in, but if ICE is told not to investigate them, you're spitting up the wind. Right. And so that we're always to a wall. I mean, and we have gotten to a point that we have a Congress that only worries about from election to election. They don't. There's very few statesmen, and I would say that they're in the Congress anymore. They're there to do the will of the people. I would say that, especially in the Senate. We have a few. I think we have some from Texas. I would say Cruz may fall in that category.
Well, we
do. In my opinion,
we do have a constitutional dilemma now when you have an administration that has decided to, in this case, regarding
with all the laws that have been broken, and you have an attorney general that will not enforce a single one, you have no place to go.
Yes.
Well, there is no
You do, but nobody wants to do it.
Well, Congress has spoken. Congress has spoken through the power of the purse. The House has, and so this is how the process works in America. And irrespective of whether anybody in the administration is uncomfortable with that process, that is the constitutional process that we've set up, and it's worked for us for a number of years, I believe. And and the good news is that we still have courts that we are able to go and plead our case to the courts and let them, and as in this case, the court ruled in favor of the state of Texas. And so again, I'm happy that happened. We all are very happy that happened. And when I received that news yesterday, I was very excited that the judge ruled that way.
But again, we elected a Republican Congress, both the House and Senate, and the very first thing they did was give up the power of the purse for the entire year, and funded everything that Obama wanted. So there is no fallback. And this one little wedge here, dealing with immigration, has been the only thing that they've even attempted to control the funds. Yeah, well, the Senate passed Senate Bill 744 a summer ago, and they were going to give amnesty to illegal aliens, but the House was not going to pick the bill up, and there were, I believe, 13 Republicans that voted for that bill, and it wasn't a good bill at all. Actually, it wasn't a good bill at all. But so I'm hoping if you and I'll send the press release, the call to action, so you can call and really have this conversation. You have some really good legislators in your congressional caucus, and they've worked really hard. The House has worked really hard to get this bill sent over to the Senate, got it passed, and get it sent over to the Senate. So now we have to work on the Senate side, although I believe Senator Cruz and Cornyn, yeah. So make some more phone calls and go visit their offices if you can, and you can call me anytime or email me if you have a question. If I don't know the answer to it, I will ask someone the answer for you. If there's anything I can do, yes.
Joyce, I just got a Twitter notification that if you guys know anybody in Florida, Rubio is folding. He's
Moving
already,
with what?
he's folding.
On Amnesty.
On this bill?
Yes. So if you know anybody in Florida,
So it's started.
tell them to call their senator.
Well,
Well, that's not shocking.
that wasn't good news.
It's not surprising, but still.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for letting the bargain.
Well, do you have any more questions, or?
I actually
Yes.
have one, but I don't know if you're the right person to ask this. I remember reading a lot about they're moving so many different departments under the Department of Homeland Security. How much of the federal government is actually under DHS now?
Well, you
that
have-
this bill would affect. Thank you.
The Coast Guard, ICE, Border Patrol, USCIS, which hands out the green cards. They adjudicate those sorts of things. They're investigators. Trying to remember who else is under.
Secret Service.
Secret Service is under Homeland Security.
Oh,
Yeah. So I mean,
But if they defund the DHS, actually.
no, they're not defunding it. The bill is
No.
funds DHS.
Right, but if it goes through, if nothing happens and they do not fund because of inaction or they can't pass
Right.
something. Really, what they will do is they will have, it'll be like the regular shutdown where, all the emergency personnel will work. But what
Essential people will
cut-
still be working.
What he will cut is Border Patrol. What he will cut are actually those people that are manning the border or our ports. That, just like he did during the last shutdown, which was no shutdown, yet he shut down the parks and he shut down things that would hurt people.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they will do this time.
Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. Let's hope that doesn't happen. Because it's a very dangerous world we live in.
It is.
And so I'm hoping that doesn't happen. And I try to be optimistic about these things. I know it's hard to be, but
Well, we're on the front lines. We are
Yes.
really on the front lines.
well, I just appreciate coming tonight. Thank you so much for inviting me, and hopefully you'll invite me back sometime.
Yes.
Joyce, thank you for all your hard work up there.
Well, thank you
It
for.
takes a special person to be in that mix for any amount of time.
And if you guys are ever in Washington, please stop by our offices anytime if you're in DC. And but I'm so happy to be back here in Texas, and hopefully I'll get to come back again. It's warmer here than it is where I live.
So where in Missouri are you from?
Kansas City.
My stepdaughter lives there.
It's 19 degrees there today, I believe.
Yeah, no snow there, but my grandson in Springfield had a snow day today.
Oh, really? There was snow in
Yeah, there was
Springfield?
like 7-8 inches,
Yikes.
but nothing in Kansas City.
I have a question, and yeah, some of y'all probably already know the answer. We know everybody's coming in the southern border. What kind of uptick have they seen along the Canadian border? Any?
It's not reported much, actually. No, it's not. The terrain up there is entirely different also. I mean, if they're going to come through a port of entry. Or on a boat, I guess, from Detroit. I don't know.
They have very good health.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about Canadians, but from other foreign countries.
Oh,
China,
yeah, in
Middle East,
2000,
whatever,
they
coming
stopped a
through
terrorist coming through the Canadian border.
Huh?
2000, there was a terrorist they stopped.
Yeah.
I think it was New Year's Eve or something that he had come through, yeah. But our southern border is entirely different, and that's why Texas and Arizona and Southern California, you guys are most affected. But all the states have become border states now because they just don't stop there, they come north.
That's right.
So, yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.